sort of what's been on my mind lately is the distinction of traveling sort of disintegrating into just being life. I'm sort of incorporating it into my way of life, where I used to, especially with this, I'd always be talking about, oh, what is traveling for, this and that. But I find it hard to sort of draw that distinction more and more the more I do it, because it's just like it's life but fast.
Right.
It's a bunch of new interactions, you're meeting new people, you're going to new places, you're figuring things out again, everything is new, but it sort of becomes normal. And I don't know, it's an interesting thing, because as I talk with other people about traveling, I think in my mind, I'm sort of drawing two major groups with traveling. It's people who travel for pleasure and people who travel for education. And I think that's such a funny thing, because we can talk about traveling and people traveling, but it's really totally different things. I've used the word like vacationing for pleasure traveling versus like traveling, which I would consider more informative or like diving into it more. But I imagine it's hard to predict what someone would want. It's hard to sort of craft that experience. And I've just been getting a peek into that myself as I've been going around with hostels, seeing hostels that do it right, hostels that don't do it right, in terms of creating something, bringing people into a state of like camaraderie and like, this is the spot, this is the place where the fun is, and bringing that experience to people and helping them, I don't know, believe that in a way. Mm-hmm. And as I've been thinking that, it reminds me a lot of what you do in terms of creating experiences. And of course, what you do is I guess it's on a bigger level, because, right, if you're in a hostel and someone's already traveling, right, that's just like a cherry on top or something else. But taking someone who, I think as the average American does, work 50 weeks a year, yeah. Right? There's 2 weeks free, and it seems like what you're trying to do is pack stuff in. That doesn't sound right, but like provide a very valuable experience within a short amount of time. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that's super difficult, because of course there's the things that you enjoy, but you never know what someone's going to like, right, until they're there in that position.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
So I think it's interesting. It'd be interesting to talk to you about like how you sort of navigate that, because I think in the past you've sort of shared with me that you're more intuitively, you maybe feel people more intuitively, or maybe the word is people pleaser. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm saying anything wrong.
No, you're right.
And I think that's a very incredible asset to have, right? Because it's about reading people, but. Yeah. But take me through that a little bit, like what that process is.
So before we start,
yeah,
am I looking at your camera or am I looking at you? And
we're having a conversation.
Are you on camera?
Yes.
Can I square off to you a little bit? Because I feel a little bit funny that I'm
of
not
course.
addressing you.
That's okay? My problem. Yeah, of course.
Cool.
Yeah, and let me just like make sure. Yeah, that's good. Perfect.
Okay, great.
All right, sorry, I didn't want the blocking to be weird. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, of course. Just more natural.
Yeah, of course.
Address you like this, right?
Yeah.
So it is a really interesting thing to balance designing an experience and just asking people to trust you, that it's going to be worth their time. Mm-hmm. I can't guarantee that it'll be fun, mm-hmm, because that's subjective.
Of course.
I can't guarantee that it'll be perfectly as described, yeah, right? Because we're working with real life. It's not a performance, so we don't know.
Whatever.
Exactly, right? I can only guarantee that it'll be a new experience for them, right? That it'll be something that they haven't done before, most likely, or it'll be a version of something new to them. Mm-hmm. It's interesting you said the people pleaser thing, because the more I do this, the more I learn that what we're offering with Hinoki is not a service, but an experience. And I think that's an important delineation, because I grew up in the service industry. So I grew up working at restaurants and shops and things where you are providing a service for people.
Mm-hmm.
And when people expect a service, they're expecting a certain kind of result. Like they already know what they want and they just want you to provide it for them.
Mm-hmm.
So like a beach vacation is a good example for that. They want to go to where there's 80-degree weather, blue skies, white sand beach, and they just want to chill.
Mm-hmm.
And like you have to guarantee that for them.
Mm-hmm.
But for people who want an experience, they're open to feeling something new, even
Mm-hmm.
if there's some level of discomfort or some level of disappointment even,
Mm-hmm.
if it's not something that they would particularly care to do again.
Yeah.
So I've had to change my thinking about it from like, I want everybody to be happy to just, I want to provide a certain kind of experience, do some storytelling around what that might be to get them interested and intrigued or curious enough,
Mm-hmm.
and then let them respond to it however they do. So
Yeah.
they might not be pleased, but they'll still come away with something different.
Interesting. So that's what you focus on. You can guarantee that it'll be new.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Like you can guarantee a new experience, but that's it.
Right.
And do people seem very receptive to that, or do you feel like that's something that you're having to put a lot of effort in to earn that trust, or
Yeah.
whatever that might be?
I think we've learned that certain people are looking for that.
Mm-hmm.
Other people want that experience, or sorry, other people want that service.
Mm-hmm.
For the people who are open and they're interested in simply having a new experience,
Yeah.
or just experiencing a different place, or exploring something that they don't get to explore on a day-to-day basis in their regular lives,
Yeah.
there is a certain group of people who want that. They
Yeah.
tend to be younger,
Yeah.
which I'm not trying to say that older generations don't have that, spirit of exploration. They certainly do, but they might have either done a lot of that in their younger years, or they've just found that, naturally as they're aging, that they need a little bit more comfort, so they need more of that guaranteed.
Predictability.
Exactly.
I think as people get older, they decide this is what I like more,
Mm-hmm.
and get stuck into that.
It
So it's
could
hard
be,
to
right.
sort of like try this
Yeah.
different thing.
Right. Or we get a lot of people who will say, I'm 65 years old, I want to go hiking in Greenland, but I want to sleep like in a warm room in a bed at night. I don't want to camp and wake up in the middle of the night and have to look for polar bears. So that's a dynamic. But generally, I'd say people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, increasingly, I think as our lives become more comfortable at home, and as they become more digitized, meaning like we're not having to rub up against the real world in an unpredictable way very often,
Yeah.
right? Like I can get on Google Maps and figure out within a few minutes the 5 most top-rated restaurants in this neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and the best place to go get a coffee, and
Yeah.
all of that, and I can see photos of it, right? So like that.
And reviews and
Exactly. So that chance for disappointment or surprise is completely taken away. So I think, in fact, the more that we have that, actually, the more we want the inverse of that, or the opposite of that. That then becomes an experience. If I say to you, like, Cooper, come to me with Albania, I'm not going to really tell you what we're going to do. Just be open. And maybe I give you some ideas of, like, we're going to eat food, we're going to visit farms, we might do some hiking.
Well, like what you're saying on that big scale of just like taking someone to Albania, what you're just talking about, it reminded me, if I don't like to go online and see like what restaurants are good. I hate that whole game. But if I'm talking to someone and they're like, oh, this place is great, you should try that out, I love that. And
Yeah.
that's sort of what you're doing, but on a bigger scale.
Like a personal
right?
recommendation.
Exactly.
Totally.
So, but that's what you're doing, but with the entire trip. And it's kind of funny because I was just thinking about it. You sort of introduced me to the idea of traveling with the Thailand trip a couple of years ago. And it's almost like, I don't know how to word this in the right way, but it's almost like you taught me how not to need you. Right? Or you opened my mind to the idea that it doesn't need to be done through someone like you. Right? Which, like, going into that more explorative mode as younger people like to do more so. For me, I remember we were talking about this afterwards, like I realized like it just couldn't be a short-term thing.
Yeah.
And like with this trip as well, like if we were just together 10 days, but like it just was like that.
Right.
You know, like we were literally in Tirana a couple days, like this trip just went by. And so that's just not enough for me. And and I guess I've sort of found that adventure in just like scrapping it out, I guess, like the getting lost, the having to find your way, and I guess this is sort of the thing that the more I travel and the more I think about what you do, because I understand sort of more about a different angle of what you do the more I travel, I realize that it would be like if I just started to think if I could replicate my experiences, how impossible that would be, because it was so many unique circumstances coming together and just something magical happened. And I think those of us that travel, I think those are always the best moments. It's the moments that you would never plan. You know, maybe something went complete shit sideways, but then like that day at lunch, like something awesome happens. You know what I mean? That's just like how it works.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm almost feeling stressed for you. Like, I don't know the stress, but it's like just actually trying to conceptualize like how to really like create an experience seems like such a difficult thing to do, because you're operating in that element of the unknown. Mm-hmm. You have to. Otherwise, like, yeah, like you said, like it's just everything is predictable, and that's not what people want. Maybe this older generation, but I don't. It's like, how do you even package that? How do you deliver that?
In a way, we can basically create a skeleton of an experience, mm-hmm. and then the actual experience gets filled in by people who come on the trip, who bring their own flavor to it, right? So like with these group trips where we've got, you know, a handful of people traveling together, I try to look for, I mean, it's hard, like I can't necessarily predict who's going to decide to come, but I try to look for the right fit for each trip based on who's interested. Yep. So I have had instances where somebody said, for example, I want to come on your Thailand trip. And then when I talk to them and I get to know them and they get to better understand what that trip is about, we actually will find, either they'll find that it's not the right fit for them and they'll self-select out, or I might advise that they try one of our other trips for some reason.
Okay.
So like I'm always trying to make sure that from what I can gather about that person, that it's the mm-hmm. right kind of experience that they're looking for generally. Mm-hmm. And if I feel like they're a good fit, like I knew that you would experience something in Thailand and Albania, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. And that Japan might be too structured for you. Like that's a very serious and formal culture that you might not enjoy. I mean, you're very open-minded, so maybe that's a bad example, but some people don't align with everywhere that we go. Mm-hmm. So when we, you know, going back to the skeleton of the mm-hmm. experience idea, when we design the trip, it's like, I know that it's going to be interesting for you guys to meet local families and go mm-hmm. to these places where you're just hanging out with like regular everyday people.
That's always the best part.
That's always the best part.
That's always the best part.
But like, I don't know, for example, that you're going to become interested in, you know, the crocheted objects that the wife of the family has made, and then it's going to turn into this like hilarious fashion show where we're drinking Rocky
for
and
2
like
hours.
For 2 hours, and you're dancing, right? With the man of the house, like wearing ridiculous crocheted objects.
Yeah.
You know, like I could never predict that would happen. Mm-hmm. But I know, because I went and met Lola and Miri, that they're fun, that they're funny, they're warm. So it's like, that's the skeleton, is we know that like something nice will happen with them. But for example, when we traveled there before with other people, it was a much more calm and sort of like, not serious, but it was more of a formal experience where we were talking about Albanian culture and history mm-hmm. and a lot more about their personal story versus like kind of the silliness that we got into with our group.
Yeah, no, that's something that I enjoy getting more comfortable with. And yeah, just being present in a place. A friend of mine put it in a nice way. He was referring to hostels, but I think this refers to any space you travel to. People think that they're staying in a place, but it's not about going in a place to stay. It's about going to a place to be. Yeah. And that makes all the difference. Once you're in a place and you're in your being, you're existing there, then the magic happens. That's when the connections are made, and it's fun to see that happen. It's almost like I don't know what metaphor to use. It's like you're like a chef or something. Yeah. Or like you don't know what these ingredients will taste like together, but like you sort of have a feeling that they'll work together. So you throw it in a pot and turn the heat on.
Exactly. And like tomatoes and arugula are in season right now, right?
Yeah.
So we know they're going to be delicious.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, bring in some other cooks in the kitchen and see what they come up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there is something about it. Like, my mind makes a lot of connections, like to teaching, for example. I can relate it to teaching because I've taught skiing a little bit, and it's all sort of the same thing, and it's like making someone enjoy their time, simply put.
Yeah.
And what does that come from? Is this a person who really like wants to dive into the material and like know everything about it and be super proficient, or are they just a person that wants to like chill and do whatever? But it's like working with the person to provide that experience. And I think the most interesting thing, and also the most difficult thing, maybe you would find this the easiest, is someone who doesn't know what they want.
Yeah.
That might be the ideal traveler or the ideal student, because then it's like a blank canvas.
I agree with that. Yeah. For me, for what we're doing with our trips, then yeah, that openness, the
Mm-hmm.
more open-minded they are, and also the more open-hearted they are,
Mm-hmm.
the better the experience is for everybody who's traveling with them,
Mm-hmm.
and for the people they meet locally.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're always looking at two things, like your personal experience as a traveler, but then also the people who we bring you to meet, like Lola and Miri, for example, or Dervish JD.
Mm-hmm.
They also are having an experience, and it's reflecting on us,
Yeah.
whether or not the guests, the travelers we bring to them are like asking interesting questions and are engaging and aren't too awkward about making conversation with them. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's definitely important that people don't come with a preconceived notion about what they want.
But that's impossible, isn't it? I think for a lot of people, again, I've talked about this a lot. I was explaining it to you. At the beginning of my trip, I got punched in the face with missing an international flight.
Yeah.
Just not a small deal, of course. It
For
cost
sure.
me $600, which isn't the end of the world, but like I needed that immediately. It was, number one, I think it's the mindset that I looked at it with. Like, I had to change my mindset immediately, because it was like I could feel like this fracturing. I could like I was in my expectation of being on this flight and going to this place and going, you know, it's like you have the things planned out. I'm supposed to go to there, so I can go to there, and if I can't go to here, then the whole thing falls apart. And so I just sort of like let that version of myself just like fracture,
Yeah.
just like break off. And that's when the trip started. Like, I needed that right at the beginning, and I'm glad it happened. Like, it was stupid. Like, I could have done it better, and I know how to be better at doing that shit now. I
Yeah.
always hate the traveling part, but I'm getting better at it. But I was slacking around. I was hanging out with my friend. Obviously, I needed to stay in New York a couple more days. That I just didn't know it, you
Right.
know. And then that happened, and then I think everything like sort of lined up. But that's the biggest thing that's so difficult, that I don't know if I could get if I was just a member of a group traveling. And I don't know if you can give that to a person while group traveling, because I think you have to want it in yourself, and you have to seek it out. Or at least for me, I had to find that by myself. You know,
Yeah.
because like, I'm sure you've gotten it where, you know, you get complaints or whatever else, and maybe you look at the complaint and you're like, this has nothing to do with me. This is just something that you experienced that, you know, maybe it was something that we all experienced, but this wasn't in my control, right?
Yeah.
When you're traveling with people, you can blame them. And I tend to do that, you know, blame my family, blame whoever. I think as people, we want to do that because it's hard to like accept that it's us.
Right.
But being by yourself, it's like, nope, I'm in the shit, you know. And I can blame myself. I could blame this person. I could yell at this person. I could like cry, whatever. Like, I could do whatever. But like, then I'm just here. And now what do I do? Now I'm in this situation. What do I do? And sort of it's just like bringing it through that, just to be like, yep, we're here. So what do we do now? Let's solve the problem. And instead of, you know, pointing fingers.
We bring our whole selves wherever we go, for better or for worse,
Mhm.
right? I mean, there's just certain moments or experiences that are going to maybe trigger something uncomfortable
Mhm.
for any one of us on a trip.
Yeah.
The interesting thing that I've seen with all of these group trips so far is that there's sort of this collective energy that seemingly nobody really wants to disturb. So I've seen it where somebody on one of our trips will have one bad day, or they'll have like one bad part of a day. Like there's something going on. It might be they're not feeling well, or something is triggering a fear, like being up high and they've got a fear of heights, but they're trying to work through it. Or the weather is just causing them to be more uncomfortable than what they really are used to.
Yeah, for me it's mornings. I feel like every morning is like, I'm just not used to.
Just not a morning person.
I think by myself, like, yeah, I'm sort of, not to like tangent, but to totally tangent. I think I'm like figuring out my routine. I need mornings to be alone.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, but anyways, like just for example, like I'm just looking at myself in that situation.
Right. So, you know, on this trip, for example, you've had to reconcile that. And my guess, because this is what I seem to notice with everybody, is that like nobody really wants to be the person to disrupt the collective experience. So a lot of people will end up choosing to work through whatever it is they're going on and kind of like check that in themselves.
But that's interesting, because what you're saying is it's almost like self-work out of selflessness.
Exactly.
So it's like, maybe I'm not, me, a hypothetical person, I'm not confident enough to go into myself and do that inner work for me. But if I have to do it for other people, then I'll do that work.
Yeah, we're inherently good people that care about the others that we are experiencing life with. And when we're traveling as a small group, even if it's just for 8 days, in a way we become like a little family. Like we are spending all of that time together, and you know, you are totally isolated from the other people in your life in a lot of ways, so that becomes your people for the week, right? And you get to know each other, you might start to develop friendship, but even if it's just out of a common courtesy, you're probably not going to, like, you're not going to feel great if like you interrupt the day, if you're the person who's like, I'm not going and I'm going to create a drama because I have to work through my issues. Or I mean, I've even experienced it for myself, whether it's with one of like our trips that I'm running, or I'm traveling with a group, you know, personally for some other recreation, of just having to like kind of be like, okay, I'm uncomfortable, something's coming up for me, but if I just like throw a temper tantrum right now, it's going to be such a disruption for everybody else. So how can I just check this? And you know, 9 times out of 10, that just sort of self-subsides anyway. Once we get out of the discomfort, we kind of forget all about it.
You separate yourself from it.
Yeah.
It's that first separation.
Yeah, and it's cool to see travelers do that. Like almost, I feel like on every trip, there's been multiple instances where somebody's having some kind of moment and they just work through it.
Yeah, for better or for worse. But like, yeah, there is something about because again, I've been trying to say this many times, I haven't like got it out. It's like a crash course in life. That's what traveling is. It's like a crash course in interpersonal relationships, right? And yeah, like you sacrifice a lot to be around these people. And I think for me, like I don't know, like I find myself very upset in my mind about people often. And sort of the route that I've taken is sort of the opposite of that. Instead of externalizing it and being like, I want to do good for these people, what works for me is like, because I find myself in a state of mind of like, fuck everyone. Like, I just don't want to be around anyone right now. Like, this sucks. You know, I find myself in that situation. But then it's like, how can I use this to make myself stronger? Or like, what does this mean about this person? Because this person is saying something that upsets me, but I'm tired or whatever. So that's like making me feel an emotion. But beneath that emotion, there's information. So like getting to that information and using that, and it's like, it's very painful because you gotta like sort of like fucking dig into yourself and like fucking analyze all that shit, and it fucking hurts because you can't like fucking turn it into anger and put it outward. Right. You have to like go inward and yeah, this hurts, blah, 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 what's here, what's there, and sort of like work into all of that. But that's been my way of doing it. So I don't know, that might be a more selfish way of looking at it, right? It's like being selfless to be selfish, being selfish to be selfless. Like I don't know, but for me it's like the one thing I can control is my actions and the person I shape myself into. And so if I try to take whatever experience, negative or positive, usually negative, and put it into that, at the end of the day, I feel good and I feel happy with the person I'm becoming. When I say the person I'm becoming, not that I'm changing, but just that my actions are different, and I notice myself reacting instinctively in a way that I would consciously like to act.
Yeah.
You know, instead of like immediately going with that emotion, just being like, yep, that's there, that's a person there, that's information, and it's sort of like, again, this crash course of like fucking going through shit. Okay, I'm hearing the shit. What do I do about it? Boop, you know, it's instead of just being like, oh, this it's like, nope, we're here. Let's do something about it.
Totally. And what I love about what you're saying about the crash course aspect of travel is, especially because you're taking yourself completely out of your, not just your comfort zone, but your routine. And there's a lot of humility that's required to accept that you don't speak the language, you don't understand the culture. You're probably going to make, tons of mistakes, a lot of social faux pas. You might get laughed at for misunderstanding something, right? Or getting lost or whatever. And you have to just temper your ego and be like, okay, I'm on their terms, right? And I think there's a lot of value in that tempering of the ego, especially doing that when you're young. I think coming into your life with, again, that open mind and open heart, because you're actually requiring yourself to be vulnerable and allow yourself to receive help when you need it, right? Like, I'm sure there's been times in your travels these past few months where a total stranger has helped you get back on track in some way that you weren't able to do on your own. Like, you're independent, that you're totally capable of just going out and exploring the world, but every now and then there's probably a moment where like you really needed somebody for some reason, even if it was just company, if you're grappling with loneliness because you've been traveling solo for so long. So I think that's really interesting in that idea of like a crash course of life through travel, because it's like a video game in a way, like but in real life, like you're putting yourself in this environment where you will be challenged.
And I've had a lot of people be very honest with me. I would say there's all sorts of relationships that you make while traveling, every type. But in the last year, through traveling, I've found, I would say, 3 significant mentor figures.
Cool.
And it's interesting because like I've been in situations where I've received criticisms that initially like I like really like have to step back and like I can't act because it hurts. Could be something simple, like I was rolling a cigarette in a restaurant and it looked like a joint. What the fuck are you doing? That looks like and I'm like, what are you talking about? It's just tobacco. Whatever. It could be something simple, but it still gets to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think I'm just looking at things with the lens of gratitude. What I see in that, or for example, what was her name yesterday at the picnic?
Lucia.
When she was like, you look very spoiled, right? And she just looked at me like out of nowhere and she's like, you look like a very spoiled person. I'm like, oh, okay. You just gotta like take that. You just gotta eat it.
Totally.
And it's like, what I've sort of done to be able to get the benefit of that information without like the negative is I see a person who cares enough to be honest, because that's what it is, right? I don't see someone that's trying to hurt me, and even if they were trying to hurt me, then that's their pain. That's something else, right? I'm going to assume that this is a person who cares enough, or doesn't care enough about being rude, right? Like they're willing enough just to be honest, even if they don't care. They're just being honest to point something out. And sometimes it's like, ooh, wow, that hurts, you know? But I appreciate the honesty, whatever it is. I've had many of those situations where I just have to like, wow. And then sort of the other way around too, where maybe I've like said something, or I've assumed like a friendship was a certain way. Maybe I crossed the line with a joke or this or that. And, I've caused people to be quite upset. And that's interesting too. And then it's like, oh no, that's just because they're sensitive in that way.
Right.
They were sensitive in that way, and that's what hurt them. They something hurt them before, and that touched a similar area or whatever that is. And I don't know. This to me is very interesting, sort of learning and getting deeper into like what people are meaning, and how to. This sounds very mechanical, but extract value from that. I wouldn't say extract value. I would say, see the value, to create the value that is there, to be within that value. And sort of what you said about like the loneliness thing with traveling, I think what's very interesting about that, you're talking about, you know, we formed this group, we're like a family these last 10 days because we're together and we're not with anyone else. But I think the really tricky thing is like, I've had a dozen of those in this trip, right? So it becomes very sad in a way too, because you create this group of friends, you're with these group of people, and it's amazing, and you care about each other, and you're having fun, maybe you're going through shit, whatever, it's real, you're together.
Yeah.
And then it's time to move on. And then it just happens again. And it's like, I think what I sort of hate about traveling, of course I enjoy it, but what I hate about it is that part. Because that is the opposite part, right? You get to go someplace, but you have to leave.
It's true.
And for everything you make, you have to lose. And so, yeah, it's that process of, yeah, you get to have those things, but then you have to lose those things and you have to let them go again. And what is sort of guiding me is the feeling that, and maybe this is something I'll have to let go of, but I feel very strongly that is not something I want to lose. And that is something that's guiding me to want to live in this part of the world just simply because of the friends I've made here. You know, it's like, it's just, and there's something encouraging about it. Like, I know that I could be dropped off some random place in the world and I could make a group of friends.
Yeah.
Like, I have that within myself. And it feels good to have gone and had the experiences and to do that, to know I have that capacity. But at the same time, it's like, I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
I already have, and like, yes, I can make more, and I have the mindset of make friends constantly, always be making friends. You know, it's like you can have more friends. It's not a selfishness thing, which is completely opposite to who I was as a young kid. I was like, one friend only. I'm like, make as many friends as possible. But I want it to be a recurring thing. Don't want it to just be like a one-off, because it's too deep.
I hear you on that. I can relate to that. I mean, the only reason why I even got like myself involved in creating travel experiences, working in tourism, is because I myself took a trip to Bhutan and just by total accident became friends with the people who organized it, started doing some volunteer work for them, got an opportunity to go back, and then I fell in love with Asia. I had to keep going. Like, yes, I wanted to go visit other parts of the world, but once I went to, like, my first trip to Asia was Thailand, Bhutan, and Vietnam for 3 weeks. And I was like, I've just scratched the surface, like, I have to go back. And then I went back to, I went to Hong Kong, and then I went back to Vietnam, and then India, and then back to Thailand. I just kept finding myself in that region. And then I started working in Bhutan, and I started living in Thailand. And then I married somebody from Singapore. And then slowly my whole life was, at least a good half of my life, my friends, obviously my relationship, my in-laws, were all over on an entirely different continent. And at that point, I'd rather go and spend 7 or 8 months of the year in Thailand with the friends I already have there, like people like Oat and others who've become like family to me, versus just constantly traveling and meeting new people over and over again. So like I hear that, and I can see how, I think for you, for me, for a lot of people, like sometimes you find a place and you're like, yeah, okay, I could go to every 190 countries, but maybe I want to go deeper here.
Yeah, I think maybe we've talked about this, I don't know, but it's using travel as a tool instead of like, praising travel as the thing.
It's not a
I love travel. Yeah,
it's not something to consume.
Exactly. Exactly. It's, for me, it almost feels like dating. It's like, oh, I'm gonna try this country, I'm gonna try this city, this whatever. Oh, I really like this city, I want to live here.
Yeah, it just clicks.
I don't want to fucking go to every place and not like that mean like, and that's so funny because like even as people who travel, I'm so far away from other people who travel. Like the surface level scratching thing, I can understand it to a point, but at the same time, like there's so many people my age that get the Intrarail or the EU rail, and it's just like I see them in a hostel one night and they're fucking there and they're gone, and I'm like, holy moly, like I don't know if I'm the only one that finds travel exhausting and laborious and like like time change, everything. Like I don't want to do it. It's about going to the place. It's a way to go to the place, to stay there, to be in a place. It's not, that's a weird thing, right? Because I think a lot of travelers, like, we have anxiety. You know, I certainly have. You know, it's just, I think there's a lot of things that you can be running from in life that traveling can be a vice almost. But I don't know. I had to I had to get rid of that and just fucking sit in a place and not like the place I was in. Like the first place I went to in Italy, I was like, fuck, I made a mistake, because I was on this farm, I was with no one, and like everything I was running away from just fucking smacked me in the face. And then I'm like, okay, well, this is fine, because I would have to deal with this somewhere, so I'll deal with it in this place in the world. It doesn't matter, I'll sit with it here. And I sort of did that work. And of course there's much more to do, but I think it's being more present with that, instead of like just changing the things around you. I'm not in it for that. I'm not in it for changing the things around me. I would rather just enjoy good time with people. And it's funny, right? Because it's like I'm converting myself out of traveling.
Yeah.
You know, it's like everything someone would like about a nice, normal, quiet life. You know, like many of the villages we traveled to, you know, just very simple. You know, you have good relationships with people, or you know, whatever relationship, but it's an intimate situation, because people know each other, and you're there for each other, and that is the most valuable thing.
Yeah, and that's, I feel, for the trips that we're doing with Hinoki, that what I really want is for everybody who comes on any one of our trips to take something from it that allows them to live their lives in a way that's more in alignment with who they really are, or at least who they are at that point in their life. And to be able to start exploring values. So it's not travel for travel's sake. I mean, even if you did a trip with us once a year, that's a lot of travel, but hopefully the point is that you're going out to learn something from people in other parts of the world who have different ideas of what does it mean to live well. Right, that's really the thing that I want to explore, actually so much to the point where I'd like to expand what we're doing beyond trips to also be media and content and conversations where we're bringing in a digital format, people who are like the hosts, the local people who we receive wisdom from all over the world, so that like you don't necessarily even have to go on a trip. Obviously there's benefit to that experiential component of it, but I just want us, especially for us younger generations, to have more conversations about the other ways of being, like the other possible ways we could be living in this world. Beyond, what a lot of us, and I'm speaking to people who I think grew up like me, where you grew up in, a developed society. I grew up in suburban, U.S. upper middle class 1980s neighborhood, right? So my worldview was shaped by that, and it's taken a whole lot of travel to other places to break that worldview. So if we can do that faster through travel and other means, I think that is going to help us. That's definitely going beyond travel. That's actually sort of the same idea I have with this. We're all doing the same thing, but we are finding different ways to do it. And I think we all want the same thing too, and we define it in different ways, right? A good life. Decide what a good life is. We all would decide what a good life is, and then we try to go for that. And by getting this information, this wisdom, it's not about convincing, because it isn't better or worse. Right. Like the U.S. where we grew up, it's not better or worse. I mean, yes, I have opinions on it, but objectively, I don't think you can say it is. I think it's just expanding the options. Exactly. Or not even the options, because we've talked about this, like about the options maybe being refining, but just like the possibility. The possibility. Yeah, like like there, and even if like I think for me, what I've gotten out of it, it's not something specific. It's if something can be done differently, it can be done differently than that too. Exactly. Right. And so I think that's inspired me to sort of be creative in many ways. And I find that I often, or maybe I do this consciously or instinctually, but
if I'm with someone who's more pessimistic, I find myself being more optimistic, or vice versa. If someone's very optimistic, I end up being pessimistic. It's sort of like I'm trying to...
Like counterbalance?
Yeah, I'm like trying to get the richness out of it. I don't know what that is exactly. I'm trying to think of, because I've gone to many farms and many people that have like tried to, you know, do communes, or, you know, try to do these ideas with living with people and like working together and, you know, all this like hippie doodah, whatever. And most of the people I talk to are incredibly pessimistic because they've tried and they failed it. And the hardest thing is working with people.
Yeah.
And that's what this comes down to. It's even if like you can get a bunch of people who can think positively and whatever, like you still have to live together. And you still have to like have some sort of agreements, and you still have to like have ways of like working through things, and then also have like a common idea of what you're doing, so that when you get lost, you can like point back to it. So yeah, just bringing this information, I think that's what I'm getting a lot of, specifically like in terms of knowledge. It's how to live with people. This is the hardest thing. If we want to break out of this insular life that a lot of us have in suburban Western society, of especially in the States, of being locked away, work, car, home, car, work, that's fantastic. But I think we have to teach ourselves how to work with each other more, because we've inherently in this system, we've trained ourselves to become selfish. We've trained ourselves to be me, take as much as possible. And, you know, of course, there's still families. Maybe that's degrading to a bit. And of course, within the family, things are still shared. But the community part has very much died off.
Right.
And that's gone back like a few generations already.
Right.
Where we have to sort of revitalize this information of what the fuck are we doing to work with each other.
Right.
And I think I had this idea of like, you know, when people are together, like think about like a homeowners association, right? Uh-huh. Like all this bullshit and like people talking drama about whatever, the new guy, about James or Susan or whatever, this is fucking drama, but noise.
Right.
I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be great if, you know, like people with free minds, you know, like they were in an area, and then they wouldn't think like that. No, there's always going to be drama. If you put people together, people live together, they're going to be talking shit about like, you know, like whatever. And that's just something to accept. Mm-hmm. And that's something to embrace. It's like, yep, we're gonna talk shit. Even though I like don't want to be associated with it, I think that's kind of a part about being human. And traveling has helped with that, because it's like everyone fucking has drama. Every country hates the country just next to it, or every city hates the city right next to it, or every city hates the town right next to it, or the town hates the city, or like there's all this like shit, but they don't really hate each other. It's just someone to talk shit about.
Right.
And I think we need to embrace that a little bit, because it's not very deep. It's just something to sort of like let the shit out.
Yeah, kind of in a way, I feel like makes me realize we don't have to take it all quite so seriously. Because if literally everywhere you go in the world, there's that dynamic, it's kind of hilarious. Like we're just so human. Yeah. Despite the cultural differences and everything. Yeah.
It's like you embrace it. Yeah, like you're like, oh yeah, they suck, and then you go over to the other side. Yeah, they suck. Yeah, they suck. It's like, yeah, this is a game. Yeah. You know, this is just, and I was having this conversation with someone, like, if we need that to connect with each other, if we need the common enemy to sort of bring us together, we got to shit on that person. There's something there, you know, like that brings people together, is shitting on other people. And maybe the benefit that we have in this point of time we're in is we can say, oh, the system, and we can shit on the system and shit on these rich people or whatever, you know, people want to shit on. So it doesn't have to be like, it's always something, you know, it's like a shuffling game of whatever you're going to like put that negative energy into. So yeah, I don't know, that's just like an example, like where it's not going to be a utopic. No, and that's what I'm very glad, as I continue to see more, is that like version of utopia in my mind breaking down. And I sort of have to like readjust like my model in my head of what I want to do, because now it's just becoming more realistic. This is how people are. Like, so how are we going to motivate people, you know? And also I think this is a thing like I've heard like forever, or I guess people with more experience are always talking about people who talk and don't do. And I've been excited, I guess I'll say it that way, to experience that in friends as well. You know, the talkers but the not doers. Because it's tough, you don't experience that, and you're like, yeah, they're on the same page as me. They like doing all this, and then you realize they're lazy as fuck. And it's like, wow, And I think there's always going to be that percentage of people, like there's people trying to create stuff, and then there's people trying to fucking leech off of it.
Well, right, and there can be those contradictions, and they can be within one individual or one community. And I think about this a lot with the trips that we do, because we're looking ultimately at ways of living well, like how to be in community, how to take care of yourself and your neighbor and the children and the elderly, and like we're trying to explore how do other people do it, right? Just to compare and contrast. But within that, like there's no way for us to go anywhere in the world and not see how it's working and how it's not working wherever we go, right? So when we first started, I had this idealistic vision in my head that like we would just go to these places where like people were all healthier and they were all nicer to each other and everybody got along and like it looked beautiful, and it's just not that way, right? It's different, so we can bring people to experience the difference and maybe the similarities of wherever they're from. But you're also going to see, they're obviously grappling with waste management and maybe alcoholism in the community, and there are definitely problems, right? So I try really hard to not sugarcoat that or insulate people from experiencing it.
And you shouldn't, because at least for me, maybe people are not as weird as me, but that is the most interesting thing. Like seeing how people treat each other in business here or whatever, just like the negative shit is the most interesting to me, because I think that's when you understand the most about a place.
Yeah.
And I might take that a step further and be like, well, then that could be useful in creating something or whatever else, because then that information applies practically. But in general, if you're just like, say your average client, someone that wants to go on a trip, like if you actually want to learn about a place, again, going back to earlier, is it pleasure or is it education? If you want to learn about a place, it's the bad shit that's going to help you understand the most. And I think that's what people are most sick of when it comes to mainstream tourism, with, like you said, the beach experience, because you're on the nice resort beach next to the very impoverished town.
100%.
And you don't understand how these relationships work and like how people like think about you, like as a tourist,
right?
Because you're not even talking to them.
Yeah. Right.
It's like you could think I'm a piece of shit. I'm still going to talk to you, so I understand why I think I'm a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And maybe you won't think I'm a piece of shit by the end we're talking, or maybe you'll think I'm more of a piece of shit. That's fine, but I'm still going to try to talk to you. But if there's such this layer of separation, which I guess people got into their heads in this resorty business, that there should be no connection between the place you're at, the people that live in that place, and this experience that is in this bubble that you can just ship people to.
It is actually a very colonial idea, right? Because world superpowers went around, colonized the world, and they extracted not only sugarcane and chocolate and whatever else materially, they also extracted concepts and concepts of escapism, right? So the earlier forms of tourism were centered around, not to pick on the British, but just to use one example, right? Like getting British people more or less out of the cold, gray climate and going somewhere exotic, right? So that exotification of the world included the beaches and the wildlife and the colorful attire that people wear and the really interesting foods that they eat, but it never included the whole story or even anything really real about the people. And unfortunately, tourism has continued that model for hundreds of years. I feel like it's only now, it seems like we're starting to move into a new phase where travelers, even older travelers, I think generally we're just wanting to see more of the world as it is and not as we want it to be. I mean, the beach holiday is never going to go away, but I think we're starting to tip the scales more towards like curiosity and people seeking truth, and I'm excited about that. Like, to me, that's an interesting place for travel to go.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Like, if back then people, and obviously people still do want that exotic aesthetic, or however you frame that, define that, but if you take that one step further, that's just being with the people, right? That is like, It's like, that's
but
like
you have to change your mind about what you expect that to be. And again, you're not the average traveler. You're very open-minded. And I'm not trying to pick on people. We just don't know what we don't know. And in the US, like, I grew up in the 1980s with all the Disney movies, Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, whatever, like, these world cultures were presented to me in this very sanitized, very like American friendly ideal. And I think that Disneyfication has actually influenced how even we travel as adults. So, for example, there are instances all around the world where people who have stopped wearing their traditional attire because it's no longer practical to work in the fields wearing, animal skins versus wearing like a microfiber or something that's more breathable, that when tourists come to the village, they'll put on the old traditional attire because that's what the tourists want to see. And they'll be disappointed if like they're wearing Nike tracksuits instead of some 100-year-old, wool adorned outfit. And so like we have to be okay as travelers that it's not maybe going to look like the way we think we want it to, because we want to experience that exoticness. But maybe what's actually more interesting than what's exotic is that connection. That if you're somebody in the middle of village in Greenland, and I can actually learn about your life as it is today, and the realities of that's just so much richer than you performing something for me.
Definitely. I think that's one of the consequences of being in such a globalized world, and it's understandable. I think I can relate to that with music. It's weird being an American and traveling because the music doesn't change. It's just different types of music that you might not listen to, but you definitely know it, and it's just like pop music or whatever. And yeah, there I guess there is some like there's trying to be this global or maybe this Western idea of what is cool, what is nice, that is kind of disheartening. But yeah, again, it is people just looking to, I guess with the music thing it's different. With the clothing, it is very much, I guess, first practical, and then second, the same thing with the music. It's almost like a status thing or like a cool thing.
Right.
And I think
like hip hop taking over the world. Right?
Yeah. And I think there's like a lag in places here, like Albania. There's like a little bit of a lag where it's like, I don't think, and this is sort of the question we were asking, are they playing this music because they think we like it?
Right.
Or because they like it?
Right, and maybe it's both.
Yeah, and I think there is like a little bit of a lag where we've had like years to listen to it, but it still is like fresh here. All like this music and this and these ways of dressing and whatnot, where we've, in the States, maybe have gone through more iterations of this thing. And so we look back on it, and they're at this iteration now. Not like comparing it in terms of time, but just in terms of this specific thing. It got here at a later point in time. So it is sort of strange. It's almost like being like in a time capsule almost, because you're hearing music from 10 years ago, and you're seeing people dress like, just in a different way.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe you would expect it to not be a reflection, or I guess I didn't expect so much in the world to be a reflection of America. But that is just the consequence of America being what it is so many things in the world are reflected on that. And there is, it is understandable as a tourist to be like, that kind of sucks. But it's more practical for where they're at. It's cheaper, maybe it's more useful in some ways.
The flip side of that, which we're also seeing, is that among a lot of the younger populations, people are reclaiming their cultural heritage. But what I love is when it's by choice, because they suddenly find it cool again and they're proud of it. It's not because the tourism industry is somehow putting pressure on them to wear traditional attire. But for example, in Bhutan, there's a fashion blogger whose account on Instagram, it's called Bhutan Street Fashion. And he studied fashion, and he goes around with his camera and he takes beautiful photos of people who are like proudly wearing traditional Bhutanese attire. With Bhutan, it's a little bit different because, like, if you work in an office, for example, you are required to wear the national dress. Or even for me, as a tourist, if I'm going to a festival, it would be more polite for me to dress in the Bhutanese national attire. So it's more in circulation by nature, But what I love is he's really celebrating how people are stylizing it in a way that's modern and interesting to them. So like how they're pairing it with certain jewelry or certain types of shoes. And even like, you know, if you see somebody who's wearing, like, let's say he finds a 17-year-old girl and she's wearing her grandmother's vintage Kira. Kira is like the dress that women wear, but she's paired it with like hoop earrings and Nikes. And she looks super cool doing it. Like, I'm really excited and inspired by younger people who are reclaiming that for themselves, and then they're finding a way to have the best of both worlds, which to me, that is culture evolving, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, it's sort of like yesterday, I asked that kid about, you know, the traditional garb that like this painting of an old lady was wearing, and it is interesting that is still popular. Because we don't really have that in the States, where everything is changing so quick, and it's changing so quick that like it almost goes back around to where it's like, you know, like grandparents' clothes are cool now, you know, because it literally is changing so fast. But it is nice in a place where it's just slow enough where it's like, yeah, it's just beautiful. Like we figured out something that's beautiful, and it just is beautiful. We don't need to change it.
Right.
It is nice already, and it's going to be nice for generation after generation after generation. God, it's weird to think about that in the States. Like if we wore clothes that like people were wearing like 100 years ago or like whatever. Like
we kind of started having that like in the 2010 era. Like I feel like around that time I was in my early 30s, so like people were going back to analog film cameras. Like that's when I think like vinyl and record players got really exciting again for young people. And then there was this fashion movement towards like the selvage denim, like the old Levi's that workers in the early 1900s wore with like suspenders, and everybody had like the handlebar mustache. You know, like
the hipster look.
The hipster, phenomenon that took over. I don't know if that's exactly the same, but it's a version of it.
It is a version of it, because I think it's just like a speed thing. Like in the States, everything is so fast. Like we literally just went all the way around. Whereas I think in places like this, like maybe with what you're talking about in Bhutan, it's a little bit of both, because it seems, you know, like sort of mixing stuff together, being very artistic with it, which of course is what fashion is. But at the same time, I think that's such a novel idea. It's not novel in terms of human, like it's a very old idea, but just in terms of my conception, fashion just being like the same for like the same, like not like it changed and then went back, but like it was always cool, and it still is beautiful, and it's still like highly regarded. And it's interesting like what makes that like in people's minds. Like talking to a 13-year-old kid, he thinks what, you know, like his grandma's wearing is cool, and it looks just as cool on a girl his age, and it's just as beautiful, and you know, like that's interesting, because you wouldn't have that in the States. You know, you take a 13-year-old in the States and like you tell them to wear something their grandma's wearing, they would fucking be pissed, you know? They'd be like, I can't go to school like this. They'd be all fucking anxious and shit. It's a totally different way of looking at it.
Unless, you know, and the one maybe deviation from that is like if somebody had like a old Carhartt jacket that was like made in the US before they started making things abroad, you know, like there's, especially I feel like where we grew up in Michigan, being sort of very blue collar state, that there's the pride in sort of like the working class aesthetic.
Quality. But I don't know if that's, I think there is aesthetic to it, but I think that is also the reaction to things becoming cheaper, like physically degrading faster, becoming useless faster. I have a buddy who's interested in collecting sewing machines. He has like 20 old sewing machines that are like hundreds of years old, but they still work. He's like showing me all about like how they work and shit. That's cool. And he's like, yeah, these new sewing machines that they make, they're fucking expensive as fuck, and then they last 3 years. And that has happened with clothes, that's happened with technology, that's happened with everything. We're being treated as people like fools. Like you buy the thing and then the thing's gonna break, so you have to buy another thing. Whereas people just used to make things to work. Like it's very simple. It's gonna last. And then it's like, you don't need to buy pots and pans because here's great grandma's pots and pans, and they're still perfectly fine because they're cast iron. You know, like all this shit. And I think what's nice is we're starting to realize how desperately like we need that. I know we were just talking about like how you don't like stuff, but I think it's incredibly important if you're a person that doesn't like stuff to have good shit.
That's exactly how I feel. Like, I can't stand having things that are just going to have to get tossed. I would much rather have something that was my mother's, right? Like, even if it's not in style anymore, like my parents' china from the 1970s, if it still works, I mean, eventually it's going to come back in style, right? And there's some style inherent in the quality of it being made in Japan instead of made in China, unfortunately, right? Because of that era that it comes from. So I think it's interesting to look at that. Like the materiality, and that's, you know, going back to travel, one of the things I do love, especially in a place like Thailand, right? Like, we play with it a little bit. It gets a little bit sort of ridiculous how much we end up playing with bamboo on that trip, and banana leaves.
And the cork of the banana tree too.
Exactly.
So fucking awesome.
There's so many things that you can do with that very organic, very regenerative materiality, right? And when we were in Greenland, we were in this private museum that was like a woman who had collected a bunch of things from generations before her and her family. And they had like this flat, like it was like a shoulder bone of an animal that was sort of flat and triangular shaped, and then like a bird's wing that was perfectly preserved. And like they used that as a little dustpan. And it was like, it was beautiful. It was a work of art, but it was also something that served a function.
Yeah.
And it was from nature. So I think that's really cool.
And I love that too, because it's all, we're so stuck in this world of waste.
Yeah.
And it's so normal to buy something and that thing comes in packaging, and then there's packaging within the packaging. Sometimes there's 3 pieces of packaging. You get to the thing, you have the thing, you throw all the shit away.
Yes.
And then we don't think about how much we're just making waste.
Right.
Or buying waste, I guess.
And wasting resources to make them.
And for me, I don't know. I get very turned on mentally thinking about fucking soil and shit breaking down. But just the fact that like you can like have something and just like, now that's soil, you know, or like that just goes to the earth. Like that's such like a fucking relief versus like, and we've trained ourselves not to care about what happens, you know, and you know, you just put your trash out by the curb, or you put your couch or whatever else in spring, you put half your house out on the road, and it goes away. Right. And now it's not in my mind anymore. But it's obviously going somewhere, and everyone's doing it. Right. And it's just fucking scary. Yeah. Like either have things that last or things that don't last, have it return back to what it was. Completely. Or continue to cycle.
Right, and that's the thing, is that it's not that hard for us to do that. We just have to have the will. Yeah. Yeah. You know, to shop or not shop that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. Like, yes, but at the same time, I mean, I'm not for government interference. I don't know where I'm going to take this, but I think genuinely with the single-use plastics, like that could be something that could just be made to be illegal. Agreed. Like with the single-made plastics. Yeah. I understand, like, you know, arguments about like, well, water needs to get here. Yeah, okay, maybe make it slow, but like, if we cycled out single-use plastics, I think that would make so much sense. And then when you don't have it, you just start thinking differently. Like, for example, in Michigan we have plastic bags. In Colorado they don't have plastic bags. I remember going to my family to a Walmart in Colorado. It was fucking hilarious. Like, you know, and like friends as well, you know, like not having bags and like, you know, the whole shit show, and I was sort of like fueling it, and it was funny, right? You know, the whole thing of where the fuck are the bags, you know, whatever, just because we're used to having the plastic bags there. But you get used to that system, and that's how a lot of European countries are as well, where you don't get bags, or you have to pay for the bag, and you don't want to pay for the bag, so you bring your own bag. Correct. And you just get used to having a bag. Yeah. And it's like, oh yeah, this is why we have bags to carry things around. Right. You know, whereas I have so many bags in the States that just like fucking sitting there. Like, well, I used that for school one time, I think. What do I use it for now? Right. I get the bag when I'm there. Right. Instead of like thinking about like just being more conscientious, and then you just feel more capable in a sense, because you have the thing to carry the stuff, and it's not like
becomes your new habit.
And it's not so reliant. You're not so reliant on all this other shit. Even if it didn't mean anything, you're not reliant on it. Right. You are more functional within yourself, and that, I think that's what's nice about stuff. Stuff is nice when you get to use it, and it serves a function. Right. You're like, wow, this is like nice. I get to use the stuff. It's actually improving my life in some way or another, and that's so rare when it comes to stuff. Because, like you said, a lot of times it just ends up in a box, and then you don't see the box, and then you're like, what is this box doing?
Exactly.
Yeah, but objects are a weird thing, because then there's multiple things about it. You're talking about like, maybe something was your mom's or whatever else. And then it's like, I don't really care about this, but it means something to me in this way or that way or whatever else. So it's, sort of deciphering these things and being able to let go of things in certain ways.
Right.
Might be another like way of moving on is getting rid of someone's stuff,
Yeah.
Like for me personally, I love wearing, like for example, like these shorts that I've worn every day this summer. These are my Grandpa Conrad's shorts.
Oh, cool.
And like they're the perfect shorts because I haven't had sweat shorts with zip pockets.
Yeah.
And it literally just makes my life amazing.
That is cool when something that was somebody you loved, like when they owned it, when you can continue to, get joy and pleasure from it and you remember them.
Especially when it's like, not that I'm like dependent on it or anything, but it's like it feels normal to have, or it's like I'm very comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Not like, of course I could not have it, but it's something that has practical value, it has sentimental value, and I like it just regardless of that too.
Yeah.
And so like I'm the type of person, like if that's the case, okay, that's all I need to wear for a whole year. Like I'm just crazy that way.
Keeps your packing simple.
Yeah, and now I'm thinking of like how I can drop off more shit. And I can feel you in that sense, like with traveling.
Yeah.
And like I'm sort of getting to that point where I've been buying more stuff to be able to like drop stuff off or like give stuff to people or whatever.
Yeah, when you're living out of a duffel bag, you're like, oh God, I really don't want to acquire things.
Yeah, exactly. And like on this trip, for example, I'm like, oh, I'll get this and this and this, because I'm like, I'll drop it off here, but I don't want to carry it.
Right.
I want to be able to like, have the rocket, have the Glico with the people I like, because that's what's going to be fun.
Exactly.
Then I don't want to carry it.
Then you don't need to carry it around.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
But yeah, I think I don't know what else exactly I had to think about. Like I was thinking about that, just like the experience creation in general. Mm-hmm. But like we were talking about a couple days ago about being a good host. That's another thing too. It's like I think that is one of the most rewarding things is to have a good time with other people who are having a good time. Or like to like not to make it so like self-centered, but to be the reason someone's having a good time.
Yeah.
Or like
to facilitate
not
it.
that it's like not that it's like about me, but it's just like I guess I sort of get that feeling like I like being the provider figure.
Yeah.
I like being the guy with the stuff, and it's the same thing with an experience, or like if something that's fun, or if you're a fun person and you're able to transmit that energy, you're still providing something.
Yeah.
And that is a cool experience.
For me, I think it's about inclusivity. Like if I look at myself as a host on these trips, right? Like when we're hosted by local people, but then I'm kind of generally hosting, like kind of getting everybody into the trip and getting them prepared to come here and, being the bridge between the local people and the travelers.
Yeah.
And I think if I had to say one thing that is probably where I feel most excited to host, and also if I had to guess my strength, is just making everybody feel like they belong. So having a sense of that, again, that inclusivity, and like that this is not some sort of like clique where there's pretense and like, yes, I want everybody to come with good intention, but beyond that, I don't care if you're young, if you're old, if you're fat, if you're skinny, if you know what I mean. I don't care what your political viewpoints are. Like what I love is that when we come together as a small group, that like these really unexpected friendships emerge, right? And you guys do that yourselves. I don't do that, but just by trying to create an inclusive environment where everybody feels welcome, then hopefully you find the commonalities on your own.
Yeah, that goes back to what we were talking. If someone, and again, I relate this to skiing. What I look at, someone needs to feel safe first and foremost. If they feel safe and, if their physical needs are met, they don't have to piss or they're not freezing or whatever, right? They're not hungry. So if they feel safe and their physical needs are met, then they can start having fun. And then once we can start having fun, then we can start like learning, if that's the objective, or connecting with people or whatever that thing is. But it goes back to that simple being in a place, which is funny because you have to sort of, and I don't think it happens so much like with trips with you, because it's sort of like you meet everyone once and then you're all together. But there's this specific conversation that happens all the time if you're meeting other travelers, like in hostels or whatever, like oh, where have you been? Where are you from? What do you do? All that shit. And it's like, there's something about just breaking through that, or maybe you don't even need that, because you have the right like common experience or whatever's happening. It's like breaking through that, or recognizing the lack in utility with that conversation. Or just, you do it like 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, and it's like you can't ignore that it's meaningless.
Right.
Completely. And it's breaking that down, like I'm going from here and being all in like what you're doing, and getting rid of that. You're not what you're doing. You're who you are in this place here, and that's it. And for me, I've had to stop forcing things, and I notice, lots of problems with forcing things, especially with relationships. That's the tiring thing. That's the loneliness. The loneliness is when you try to connect with people that can't connect with you.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know that, but all the times when I've connected with people the most, like this trip has been back and forth between, oh, I'm lonely, I want to connect with people, and oh, I'm sick of people, I want to be by myself, right? Yeah. I think that's a lot of life, right? Is that back and forth. And it's like when I'm like, oh, I'm sick of trying to connect with people, like I'm wasting energy, this and that. Like as soon as like I get to that like point, like that day or whatever the situation is, like me not giving a fuck, I just end up connecting with someone. Because I'm not trying. I don't want to even connect with anyone. I don't. I'm just here, me, like this, right here.
One of the things I'm most excited about exploring in general life, like generally with life right now, not just with travel, is nonverbal communication. So how can we connect through being in a shared space versus that small talk? That there are other ways for us to be able to connect. Like if you and I wake up tomorrow morning and we go on a 3-4 hour hike and say literally nothing to each other the entire time, part of me feels like we'll have connected more than if we were chit-chatting the whole way about this and that.
I totally agree.
Like, can we share space? And there's intimacy in that shared space if we're not feeling like we have to talk back and forth the entire time. So on our Japan trip, which is starting 2 weeks from this week, we're actually requiring that everybody start the trip in silence. So from the moment they all arrive at the hotel and have the first dinner until the middle of day 4, they will not have the opportunity to communicate with each other through words. And we're going to be led into a day of learning about Zen sitting meditation, which happens in silence. And then we're going to do some like other spiritual trainings with another group of Shinto practitioners that will require us to stay silent during that participation.
You ever notice when you're talking that like people get jealous?
What do you mean?
I'm just saying in general, you're like, 2 weeks you're going to Japan, this and that. It's
okay.
like, you have a shitty life, Bethany. God damn it. That sounds awesome. That's really cool. But I wonder like that seems hard to enforce. But I guess, you just get everyone on the same page beforehand.
Yeah, there's a great book if you're interested in hosting and just experiences in general, facilitating experiences. There's a book called Gatherings by Priya Parker. And she's like a master at just the human dynamics of gathering and how it's not about like the decor on the table at your dinner party, but about how you facilitate connection. And she has this concept she calls generous authority. And so if you want to make sure everybody has a good experience, you do have to create some sort of rules, like some rules for engagement, especially if you're going to get a bit experimental, like requiring people not to talk to each other for 3 days. But what I'm really excited about is that there's going to be people, there's 2 women who know each other already. The rest of the people don't know each other. They will have some sort of physical and energetic understanding of each other before they know where they're from, why they came on the trip, what they do for a living, etc. And I'm really curious to see how they choose to connect when conversation becomes a possibility.
Yeah. No, there is something about the rules like that. And I don't think they even need to be verbal. I was staying in this community, this is the one in Tuscany, and we would be smoking a lot of weed, not like a lot of weed, but just fairly often, share a joint like before doing an activity, like working, like physically working and this type of stuff. And I think the first day I got there, because before that I was staying in Genova and I was with my stoner friends, so we were like smoking a lot, so my tolerance is up there. And honestly, the weed was worse, right? Which makes, unfortunately, they can't grow it, whatever. But first time the joint was passed around, or the second joint that was passed around, I could feel that I was hitting it too much. I could just feel it. Like the old dude was looking at me, and then when the way he took it, like I could just feel it. And I could speak enough Italian, like he could tell me.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't need to tell me, because I could feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And then from then on, I switched my mentality completely to, this is a social thing. This is not about me getting high. Right. This is about us experiencing this to the fullest as possible.
I love
if I'm over here just smoking, right, then I'm going to get somewhere and you're going to be in another place. Right. The idea is to be in the same place. And so the game that I made for myself, and again, none of this was spoken, but sort of what I decided, the game that I decided to play was, I want to, instead of thinking about how many hits can I get, it's about how many hits can I pass along.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, like, if you're in a group of like 8 people, and you smoke a joint, it might go around twice, right? Or maybe 3 times. And it's like with that mentality, it's like I'm literally just giving a hit to myself on another round around. I'm just making the joint last longer for the whole group. This is our joint, and sort of thinking about it that way in a very communal sense. And a similar thing with food as well. Although with food, it's not like you need to ration it the same way with like weed or anything. But yeah, just changing that mentality to reflect something more.
Yeah.
Than just taking.
Yeah,
and just
exactly.
taking. And it feels good too, because in that moment, again, like I have high tolerance, and so I'm like, yeah, I'm not really getting high. That's fine, that's fine, because this is about us.
Well, a lot of times you'll see if you're having dinner somewhere in Asia, especially a place like Japan, you refill the other person's glass. You refill their food. You pass things to them. You're constantly kind of catering to them. If you remember traveling with Pao in Thailand, how good he is at that, at making sure that everybody is tended to. And it comes from a very genuine place. Mm-hmm. But the idea is that he's doing that for you, but then you're also doing that for him, right? Yeah. Versus us just sort of, we share, but we're serving ourselves. There's something nice about like that. I do it for you, you do it for me.
And it doesn't need to be written or tallied or anything.
Right.
It's, when I have energy, I'm going to put that energy in, and when I don't, I'm not. And when you have energy, you're going to put it in, and when you don't, you're not. Yeah. And there's no expectations to put more or less energy in.
Exactly.
It's just give as much as you're willing to give. And I think once there's that invitation and people realize that they're in a space where people are agreeing on this, then at least for me, I found myself wanting to give more, and I think other people as well, because you realize you're literally just multiplying.
Yeah.
It's like magic.
And that's part of that collective experience again, right? And like you said, it can be nonverbal, because you might not even speak the language, but if you observe and you're present to what's happening around you, you can kind of fall into that energy and participate in it as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it takes a lot. And I think another American traveler buddy of mine, he calls it American, the way that we fill in the silence with words. Yeah. I don't know if that's American, maybe it's West. Probably it is very American. Yeah. But we sort of, going back to what you were talking about a little bit earlier with silence, we sort of have this uncomfortability with just being, I don't know if it's this sort of collective insecurity we have that this person is going to think something weird of us if we don't make some noise out of our mouth or something.
It's really weird, right?
It's super strange.
Why can we not handle silence?
It's super strange. Right. And yeah, I've found myself in that mode too, where I'm like, dude, just shut the fuck up. What are you, in my mind, I'm like, I don't even want to hear myself. I don't even want to hear what the fuck I'm saying. So why am I putting it out there? I don't care. And that's a telltale sign. It's like, if you don't care about what you're talking about, no one cares about what you're talking about. You're literally just annoying everyone. You're just annoying everyone.
For sure.
And then that goes back, someone might say something about that, but and I would have to thank that person, because most people won't say anything. Most people will just be like, Jesus Christ, and try to get away. But the people that care will be like, dude, you're being fucking annoying. And I'll be like, man, that hurts, because I don't want to be fucking annoying, and I don't want to be seen as fucking annoying, so that hurts. But now that I know that, then I know how to change my behavior. So
totally.
it's like,
it's way better than people just quietly and awkwardly like shifting away from you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because sometimes, like, I don't know, I've had to really like pay attention to those things, because I find it very easy. I guess not very easy, but I find it much easier when people are direct with me and what they want. And that's, again, why I have to be appreciative when people are assholes to me, because I'm like, oh, that's what I asked for. I want people to be direct. I don't want people to like fucking like be like whatever, like kind of saying it, kind of not saying it, passive aggressively, whatever. So I have to appreciate the aggressiveness when it comes. But that is something that I've been trying to like get more in touch with, is that intuitive side of like how people are sort of feeling. Because again, I think we're talking a little bit about, or I'm talking a little bit about what I was talking about earlier with people being sensitive. And I've had that come back and like punch me in the face, literally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's hard to like know that if someone is guarded in a certain way and then like it flips like that.
That's emotional intelligence, and you can strengthen it. And I think you can strengthen it through observation and humility. So travel, again, is a good way to do that. And it's exactly the fact that you're aware that you want to do that, you're going to be more likely to be observing people and catching the nuances in how they respond to you, whether that's their facial expression, their body language, right? If you're talking, right, to me, and I'm like not looking at you, and like I'm, body language is pulled back and I'm not engaged. Like if I'm here, obviously I'm very interested in what you have to say, right? But if I'm kind of like, like whatever, I'm getting up and moving around a lot, then like I'm probably not super interested in that, maybe.
Or you have ADHD.
Or that you do, right? If you're monologuing, like
exactly.
sometimes people talk.
So it's hard to pinpoint it.
Yeah.
I think sort of the technique that works for me, I try to eliminate the separateness and try to get out of my mind. Because if I get out of my mind, and then I'm just in I'm just existing with an experience, which is what we're all existing within, then I think you can feel the fields. I think that's what it is. I think you can actually feel it.
You can.
You can actually feel how other people are feeling. But you just have to sort of like break out of the structure that like we create to protect ourselves. And some of us have that stronger, some of us have that weaker. But yeah, breaking out of that structure and sort of feeling it. And also, I think the more experience I have and the more uncomfortable situations I'm in, the more I can tell when someone else is in an uncomfortable situation. Like this is going to be a weird hypothetical, because we've all had to piss when we can't go to the bathroom. So we all know the feeling of like squirming around.
Yeah, it's the worst.
But if you've never like had to hold in piss, it'd be like, well, why are you dancing?
Right.
You know what I mean? But like having had that experience, like you can know that, and then you can help that person deal with their need immediately.
It creates empathy.
Yeah. Which is, I don't know, is that empathy, or is that like memory of our own bad experience, which is like facsimile.
Well, but if you didn't care,
empathy.
you'd just be like, wow, it sucks to be you,
Yeah.
I'm not going to pull the car over and I'm going to make you wait another 3 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I get kind of tough on my definition of empathy, because as it's, the definition is it's feeling what someone else is feeling.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe that's kind of redundant to go so like into that, but I try to assume that I don't know what someone is feeling. I try to know as much as possible, but then I will assume that I don't know what they're feeling, because the worst thing is when someone's like, yeah, I know. And you're like, you don't fucking know.
Well, I don't
fucking know what I'm going through.
Is that really empathy, or is that just...
I think it's trained. Like I had a buddy who does. I have a buddy who does like EMT stuff, and they're trained to, of course, they deal with all sorts of fucking people. Crazy job, or volunteering actually. Yeah. People who are all fucked up on drugs, or like terrible trauma, or whatever is going on, and people in these situations are trained to say, no, I understand all of this. And it was funny because we were with the buddy who was like doing whatever, like fucking going off, blabbering, and he was doing the same stuff. I understand. I had to tell him, I'm like, dude, like, I don't know if this is how you're being interpreted, but if I was in his position, like, I don't know, this dude was talking about something with his parents or whatever. I don't remember the details. I'm like, but that didn't happen with your parents. So you don't know.
Right.
Like, and I know that about you because I know you. He doesn't know. But like, I know that about you, that you don't know that. And so I think it's sort of assumed and I guess taught that like that is the proper way to sort of console someone. And maybe in an emergency situation, that is what you go to. But I think in a more casual situation, it's fucking insulting.
I agree with you. And I don't think that's real empathy. I think that's sort of just saying words to try to make the other person feel more comforted. But I think real empathy is if you can sit and quietly be humbled by somebody sharing their experience.
Well, it's feeling it with them,
right.
Feeling the shit with them. So it's not even, it's being humble, it's being open, but it's also allowing yourself to feel that pain.
Yeah, and let it be awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Like sit in the awkward silence of them talking about their loss or whatever they went through, right?
Yeah, and then you start to hurt that. You start to feel that hurt, and I think what it is, you know, again, the filling in the silence, the I understand, blah, blah,
the
blah,
platitudes.
Blah. Yeah, it's like that is when the listener themselves is uncomfortable.
Yeah,
it's
that's
because
exactly right.
Yeah, it's because you want the person to shut up.
Right.
No, I get it. Shut the fuck up. I get it. You know.
Right.
And yeah, so I think we lack good quality listeners, or we haven't learned how to listen, really, how to like actually like shut our minds off, not shut our minds off, but shut our thinking off.
Yeah.
To think with another person. I think that's the most beautiful thing when a conversation really clicks, and it's flowing. It's almost as if there's one person talking. And maybe I'm a little bit crazy, but in my mind, if I'm thinking, right, if I have an issue that I'm going through, oftentimes, you know, maybe different personalities, or not different personalities, but different points of view will break off, you know. This voice will take this point of view, this voice will take this point of view, whatever. That's within one mind, but then that also happens outside as well. And that's the cool thing, is like we are thinking together. That's a hard thing, and I find myself in that a lot too, where maybe there's like an anxiety to have something to say or to provide value. Again, that's the negative side of wanting to be the providers. Then that's what your focus is on. You know, wanting to, you know, be able to put something out, or like to create something, or like to do value, or this and that, instead of just like absorbing and realizing. The same thing as connecting with people. You don't create the connection. The connection will happen. If it's there, it'll just happen.
Right.
You won't have to do anything.
Right.
Same thing with speaking and with thoughts, and especially with this, it can be like very anxious to think about, something to talk about, this or that. But I know that it's just me. Yeah. And if I let myself just be and allow myself to be comfortable enough, then I will say something. And maybe it'll be stupid, but I will get something across, and I don't have to stress about it.
Right.
So that is what I enjoy about talking and about sharing experiences and about learning. I don't know. I fucking enjoy all of it. Did I have a specific point? No. It's just fun. It's like a fun adventure to like dive into. Yeah,
well, I'm excited that you're doing it, and it'll be really cool when you've sort of put together like the episodes, and you know, to see your point of view come through in all the conversations you're having, but then also to see sort of the diversity of the discussions that you're having.
Well, and people ask me, they're like, what do you talk about in your podcast? You didn't, but people in general. You know me well enough to not ask that question. And I think what I've discovered is, like, because at first I'm like, it's all about the points of view about people that I'm talking with. You know, I want to hear people's stories, and I want to hear their experiences, their knowledge, and this and that. But I think what works better, if I'm in that mentality, it's like extraction. It's like, okay, Bethany, give me what you got.
Give me your story.
Come on, give it to me. Yeah. You know, that's like extraction. That doesn't feel very good. The system that I'm refining myself more to, specifically with this, because I went into it not really with any intention. I was like, oh, I want this model, this model, this model. I'm just like, fuck it, I just gotta start talking. I think the model that I'm starting to develop is I need to bring something to the table to start.
Yeah.
So I need to have something that I'm thinking about, something that's on my mind, something that's like sort of like tickling my interest, and bring that to the table. This is what's interesting to me. This is what I've been thinking about recently. What do you think about this? And that, I think that is more. That does more. So it's like, it's not just that I'm talking with you so I get to learn more about Hinoki or whatever. It's that when I am talking with you, I'm thinking more about these things. So these things come up. Yeah. So it's like, it's a weird thing, right? It's not that you're saying it, it's you're making me say it just by me being here with you, because now I'm thinking in a way to talk with you and to connect with you. So that brings thoughts up in a different way.
Yeah, no, and I think any good podcast host does that, right? That you have to, I think, share from your point of view so that whoever it is that you're talking to, there's like a point of reference of, like, even if we're talking about an entirely different subject like the weather, but there's some sort of like grounding in your point of view that gives us a starting point. And I don't have to agree with you or have the same point of view, but if you were to just sort of like blindly ask me questions and not share from your perspective, then
it's like a dance.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta help each other out.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just like leave the other person hanging. That's sort of what I've realized. And sometimes I end up talking with people and I'm like, okay, I have to keep talking. You know what I mean? Like, because they just don't have something to say.
They're just not ready to reciprocate yet.
Exactly. So I don't know. It's funny because I think I learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about people when you put a microphone on them, for sure. Because they can act totally differently. But it's all good. It's like, okay, now I've got it. Like, what is interesting in my mind? I'm going to point to what's interesting. And it happens all the time where I stumble onto a dead end where I'm like, I was trying to make a point and then I lost it because I just started like, I made it too gross. You know, I was talking about connecting everything together and I'm like, now I'm just in the area of complete abstraction and I'm back to square one. And I can just like look at that like that's a piece of shit. Let's keep moving forward. Yeah. Like, I don't know what's forward. Right. And it's kind of scary because I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth next. But if I did, then it wouldn't be any fun.
Well, do you feel like we covered a lot of good ground?
I think so.
Today?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I'll let you get some sleep.
That's good. You can probably feel that I'm starting to like trip on my words. Getting tired.
Yeah, no, for sure. That is that other thing too, right? Like knowing when people are sort of done. Like it's the head nod with the smile and the Yeah. Well,
catch me at like 1 p.m. with a coffee versus whatever time it is now.
It is tough. Right. And I want to make it more ritualistic and make it matter more in terms of like what I'm doing during the day. And I don't know. I want to put more importance on this.
Develop a whole shtick around like asking people questions at night when they're tired. Like, and then it's almost like, you know, the show, The Hot Ones.
Yeah, but just with tired.
Right, so the later it gets, the more challenging the questions get.
And we just smoke weed
personal.
and eat melatonin.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole time. Yeah.
Just like feeding me like chamomile tea and magnesium.
Yeah, that is a tough thing. I was saying I'm not a morning person, I'm a night person. I get more energy at night. But I think that is the trick. It's finding people to take it seriously, to put it in a time of day where we can put energy into it. Yeah. But I appreciate you putting the energy into it, even being tired.
No, I mean, I love talking to you.
Yeah.
And you have such good questions. Like, you have such a good way of getting beyond, I think, the surface that, you know, I talk about travel a lot, and it could be very, you know, just same, having these conversations all the time. But you take it to a different place.
I'm glad.
I love that.
I'm glad. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Never quite sure what you're going to talk about.
Good. Me neither.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well,
cool.
We'll call it good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.